I'm Jasmine Lowe, and today I will be joined by a groundbreaking Canadian woman who started a podcast to give Asian women like herself a raison d'etre. I bought a copy of her audiobook, The Tao of Self-Confidence, and I've been listening to it with so much resonance as a fellow Asian woman. In one of the chapters, Sheena talks about how the algorithms have clumped Asians into a monolith culture, all in one same rice bowl. However, 49 sovereign countries, 4.7 billion people live in Asia with 2,300 recognized languages. The book came together from Sheena's magnanimous effort in interviewing more than 800 Asian women for her podcast that she started about 8 years ago. The success of the Tao of Confidence rides off the back of her first book, Women Who Boss Up, which featured 12 Asian women from the STEM and finance industries. In about 208 pages, this Wiley published second book, released in May 2023, was listed as the Wall Street Journal bestseller. Joining me today is Sheena Yap Chen. Hello.
Hi, Jasmine. Thank you so much for having me on today as a guest. It's such an honor to be here.
It is such a pleasure to have you, Sheena. I'm so gobsmacked that you have dedicated this time with us. And I don't have a million downloads on my podcast, but I do have a few listeners from this region. And I hope that in what I am trying to do, which is 99 women who are authors, who are women in the arts, in publishing, and the creative industries, that we can get all these voices together and women from all areas of the South China Sea. And there's a particular reason why we're choosing the South China Sea. As we all know, the South China Sea is one of the most contentious um, uh, areas in the world right now because of the focus and attention from Western nations, including Australia, the UK, India, America, France. They're all focused in this area. And so we are the women who are calling for peace. It's where our ancestors come from, I suppose. We'll start with how we all began. Would you like to share a little bit about, how it was when you were 7 years old? And, even before that, you were in the Philippines, if I'm not wrong.
Yep, I was born in the Philippines, moved to Canada when I was 7, and everything really started from my upbringing, especially, coming to a Western culture. You don't see anybody that looks like you on television or any form of media. So part of me was always ashamed of being Asian. I wanted to have blonde hair and blue eyes to feel more beautiful. I actually didn't like being Asian growing up. I was just really, I just hated it, to be honest. And it wasn't until my 20s where I decided to dye my hair back from blonde to my original hair color where I finally embraced myself, my true self, my Asian self. And in 2015, when I was dealing with my own issues of confidence, I was looking for resources that really catered to Asian women, and there wasn't any. And so part of me thought maybe something was wrong with me, but also in Asian culture, especially for Asian women, we're taught not to talk about the things that we go through. And for me, representation was still important because there wasn't a lot of representation out there. So I started the podcast called The Tao of Self-Confidence. Didn't really know what I was doing. There wasn't a lot of Asian people podcasting at that time. There was probably one Asian guy who was doing it. And I said, if he's doing it, I'm going to go ahead and do it. Since then, I've interviewed over 800 women from different parts of the world, different cultures, different career backgrounds. And as much as I love podcasting and what it's done, it was still a very small platform compared to other forms of media. And I really wanted to create this visibility, showcasing Asian women as strong, as brave, and courageous, to showcase them as leaders because it's so important. And so in February 2021, I actually co-created a book and it got launched called Asian Women Who Boss Up. And it highlights the stories of 18 Asian women who are able to forge their own path, overcome obstacles, and thrive. And this book was really special because there's no books out there that highlight that many Asian women, especially their stories. And then to see that many Asian women on the front cover of the book is very inspirational, right? We want to see people that look like us, that's been through similar situations. And so, I was sharing this book out to everybody because when you look at the number of Asian authors in the publishing industry, it's like almost next to nothing. And in May of last year, I actually got approached by Wiley to write a book on the topic of Asian women leadership. And a part of me I almost said no because I hesitated and I was going through a lot of imposter syndrome, thinking like, is this publisher okay? Like, are they sure they want me to write this? And so it's great that I have a support system who pushed me, who said, just go for it. And so I did. And, I had to write this book in less than 3 months in order to have this launched by May of 2023. So it's been really cool to see this book everywhere, to see the people who love telling me how it really resonates with them and that it can really like help them in their own journey. And so I'm really grateful for that. And to see this all around the world too. So, it's been in the Philippines, it's been in Singapore, Europe, even Africa. It's even in Australia. I have a friend who lives in Australia and she saw it at the bookstore there. So to me, that was like amazing that it's like on the other side of the world.
I
And
know,
so
right? I was listening to the audio version yesterday. I couldn't wait, so I just got it on Audible, and I was listening to it, and it's just every single word, every paragraph. I could feel the pain, I could feel the angst, I could feel the power. It was just so amazing, Sheena, what you've done, because I think, and that is what it is, the Tao of self-confidence. You've just shared sort of like a common voice. And isn't it bizarre that we are halfway across the world, but yet we share that same, you know, pain?
yeah, I mean, especially in Asia, there's just so many things that still happen, right? If you look at India, child marriages are still prevalent. If you're a widow, you're considered an outcast to society. In China, if you're 25 and over and single, you're literally called a leftover. And in Japan, it's called Christmas cake because after Christmas, you're literally called a leftover. I mean, all these things really affect us, right? And it's been passed down from centuries, right? Not realizing that this really affects all of us, whether we're in Western cultures like America, Canada, and Australia, or even just in Asia. Collectively, we've been dealing with this, and no one's really ever talked about it. So it was important to bring all these issues up so we can find ways to heal from it and really show up as our best self, right? There's a lot of leadership books out there, and they're great, don't get me wrong, but they're very rigid manuals and they don't really focus on getting to the root cause as to what is really stopping us from moving forward, especially as women, because as women, we're different. We're different. We're more emotional, we overthink about it a lot. There's double standards we live by. We want to, we overthink a lot as women, so it's like we have to figure out why do we go through all this and like find ways to break through that.
What were your earliest memories as a child arriving in Canada? You must have been so excited.
Actually, I wasn't because I didn't know what Canada was.
Right.
It's funny.
So what, your
um
parents came back and said, "Oh, let's pack and we're going off to Canada."
Yeah, pretty much. We went on different plane rides. Like we went to Hong Kong first, then we went to San Francisco, and then to visit my aunt there. And my dad was like, "Oh, we're gonna go to Canada." I'm like, "Canada? What's Canada?" And he's like, "That's where we're gonna live." And I'm like, "Is it like America?" No. I'm like, "Is there a Disneyland?" No. I'm like, "Why can't we move to America? Why are we going to Canada? Like, I've never heard of Canada ever, right?" And it was totally different, of course, because I mean, there wasn't a lot of Asian people. It's a very multicultural city. I saw snow for the first time in my life.
Hmm. Hmm.
Clean roads. When you look at the Philippines, there's parts of the Philippines where it's just dirty, right? So it was just like a culture shock, right, at such a young age.
So, would you like to share a little bit more about your family?
Yeah, so I have two sisters, one older, one younger, so
Mhm.
I am the middle child. My older sister is married to her wife, and that was difficult for her, especially in Asian culture. It's like if you come out to your parents, it's either they accept you or they disown you. There's no gray area, there's no middle. So we were fortunate that our parents accepted her, of course. And last year she got married in the Philippines, and that was a little bit scary because most of our extended family members didn't know about it. But we live in a small city in the Philippines. Everybody knows everybody's business. So when that came out, they all accepted her. And it was the first time she was able to like share her wife and her
Mhm.
kids on social media, right?
Mhm.
Because before she would have to live a double life. And I never would want that for any person. Like I understand not everyone gets to be that lucky.
Mhm.
Um, I hope sharing the story, people can realize like, they may love someone else that's not the opposite sex, but that's the same sex, but it doesn't make them less of a person, right? So we were just really grateful to be able to see that happiness now. Like she can live as her true self, which is not always easy for Asian culture, right?
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. Yep.
yeah, yeah. And then I also have a little sister who married a Lebanese man. So my nephews are biracial, Chinese and Lebanese. And when you're biracial, I've interviewed a lot of women who are biracial, and one of the common themes is that sometimes they don't feel Asian enough, or like say Chinese enough, or Lebanese enough, or like there's no like they feel like they're stuck in the middle and they don't belong to either of the cultures they were born into. So I
Yes.
always do my best to let them know that they're born in two amazing cultures versus trying to pick and choose, because I mean they get the best of both worlds. And I would never want them to feel like I don't want them to feel like they're like an outcast or feel left out because they come from two different cultures.
I have to say, in Malaysia, for example, there are a lot of mixed race, mixed, and I mean, that is the world moving forward, isn't it? We're all going to be mixed. I mean, it would be really hard, like what you just said, like not Lebanese enough or not Chinese enough. It's who puts that on, you know? Who says that? Like, who are the people who say that? It's usually family. It's usually um I don't know. I suppose it would be usually family when you're going out to family gatherings. The most disgruntled person would be another family member who would say that. So sometimes I suppose it really starts from family, this understanding from that small microcosm of our family unit. Even in my own family, we've got so many mixed marriages. But usually the naysayers or the ones who give caution are family members. Could be some auntie or some uncle who's just said something that nobody else would say, but they said it, right? And then it's like, oh, okay, I'm not going to go to next year's Christmas. I'm not going to go to the next year's whatever. But yeah, it does start from that small little unit within the family of criticizing one another, or coming out in front of family and then everyone getting the shock of their lives. um yeah, so family, I suppose. Family is where it all begins. And going back to you in Canada, like, wow, where is this? And you're 7. I'm just imagining a 7-year-old Sheena. How was it for you going to school?
Um, I guess elementary school was different, I guess. I mean, I got made fun of in school, but I mean, it wasn't as bad as I think bullying is nowadays, especially with social media. I got called names as a kid, and I don't really talk about it, not because I was traumatized, it's just because it's so long ago. So, I mean, I still had some great friends along the way too in elementary school. But yeah, I mean, going to school in Canada, no, it's different because you have so many different cultures that you can connect and learn from. And it's awesome to see that, right? I mean, if you live in Asia, it's usually just one culture, right? Versus like Canada, it's very multicultural. You know, you can literally eat every cuisine in the world, which is really amazing. In the summer, there's always a different festival from a different culture, and it's a great way for people to connect, learn from each other, and realize we can all live in harmony.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go to the next pillar now. We're going to discuss the women who came before us. So we're going to discuss your maternal side, the strong women that you can remember, like your aunties, your grandmother, her sisters, and to name them as well, because that's the purpose of this podcast, is to put a name to the aunties, or like, we used to just call them Kuma or Gogor, or, but they never had names. So the purpose to now in this segment is to give the names to these women. Yeah, would you like to share?
Yeah, I mean, of course, my mother has been someone who I look up to. Her name is Dee Dee. You know, she's someone who always stood up for herself. I remember one time we were eating at IHOP, which is a pancake place in the US. And I was really excited to go that time because I always saw it in commercials, and we would drive to Buffalo just to, we drove to Buffalo just to go eat it because they didn't have it in Canada. When we got there, we were the only Asian family. And our waitress wasn't the nicest, let's just say. You know, she served everyone else before us, even though we got there first. And it was just overall a really bad experience. And I remember as my mom was leaving, as my sorry, one second. So I remember as we were leaving, um, sorry, I got blanked out.
No worries.
So
Pancakes.
as so as we were leaving, the hostess asked my mom, you know, how was your experience? And she mentioned, well, it wasn't great, right? She was upfront about it. It wasn't great. And I think it's because of the color of our skin. And when the hostess heard that, like she had no rebuttal. Like I don't think she expected my mom to say anything because we're not seen as someone who would say something back. You know, most of the time Asian women are seen
Yeah.
as quiet. So when she said that, she was taken aback, and then we just kind of left. And from that moment on, I will never set foot in an IHOP just because of that experience.
Yeah.
And I share a little bit about that in the book. So that's one.
Well, I hope they will come up to you and give your mom and you like a lifetime's worth of pancakes.
It's okay. I don't need that much pancakes in my life.
No, actually,
uh,
sometimes it's really just that one moment, isn't it?
yeah,
And that lady might not have even realized that she was
may-
being systemically racist.
maybe. I don't know,
Yeah.
but
I mean,
I
why
mean,
else would she ask?
I remember it, and I remember the waitress not being nice to us and not serving us properly, and it was just an overall bad experience.
Or
So
maybe she asked because she wanted to make sure she had her tips.
I don't know. Well, she was a different person from our server, so she was the one at the
Oh, I
front
see.
who like seat you at the table and stuff.
Right.
So yeah.
Hmm.
And recently, you know, I had to write a life story about my great grandmother. So her name is Anna,
Yes, I
and
saw that on LinkedIn. And if anybody who's listening who's interested to follow Sheena, she has an amazing newsletter on LinkedIn that you can follow and subscribe to. Or is it
oh,
actually on your website?
it's on
It's
LinkedIn.
it's on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, I started writing about my great grandmother because we were doing like a special project on my great grandparents, and you know, she went through a lot. And you know, Asian women back in the day, you know, never went to school, just did it as they were told, never rocked the boat, had to go through all kinds of like setbacks and challenges. I mean, you know, I recently found out her feet were binded, and that was like
Is that
typical.
right?
Yeah, that was typical back in the day, right? Because it was seen as a status symbol. But
Yes.
you know, there were times where she had to take care of all of the kids by herself while my great grandfather would go to work. You know, she had to, and you know, my great grandmother had 12 kids, so
Wow.
that's a lot of kids to take care of. Um,
Were they the first generation to the Philippines?
yeah, my great grandfather and great grandmother. Yeah.
So that would make it they would have moved to the Philippines in the 18 like mid 1800s?
Um, I have no clue, to
No
be
clue.
honest. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Maybe in
my
the early 1900s.
early 1900s,
Yeah.
I would give anything to just go back to that time. 1880s to 1920s. That 40-year period seems like there was so much that happened. And it was also internally in China. There was a famine, there was drought, there was war. So they were all kind of like the men were sent out first on boats. And in
Yeah.
one of my research, um, I was reading about how there was this Magellans twice a year from the Philippines to Acapulco. I think it
Hmm.
started like in the 1600s.
Oh,
So the people from China, even slaves from Africa, China, Southeast Asia, everyone would basically flock to the Philippines, board these Magellan ships. They were bound for Acapulco.
oh,
And that was like from the 1600s. It was so interesting. I really want to do more research on that. But I mean, that basically just brings all of us together in a melting pot, right? Because it's like Philippines was basically like the gateway.
hmm,
And
yeah,
so that formed like this funnel, this gateway, like America, Asia, and even Africa.
yeah.
Um, and I was talking to another cousin of mine who's, I think, um, they're from Toronto, and then I have an ex-boss who's Singaporean, and he was
Hmm.
telling me about his grandfather who was a slave is sent to go dig up the gold mines in America,
Hmm.
and basically they're not paid, so they're given like board, they're given meals, and they go dig every day until they strike gold. So apparently this fellow struck gold, and then he went back to China as a very rich and wealthy man. And this is my ex-boss who's from Singapore. So I think there's all these interesting stories, this web of stories of Asian culture and how we actually survived. Like, imagine some of us were, from different levels of society, from scholars to slave traders to slaves, traders, and so on. So I understand your great grandparents were in the logistics business.
Yeah. Yeah, they
So,
started the shipping line in the 70s.
oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
Um, I mean, they started it in the most uncertain time in the Philippines. That was during martial law. So it's really uncertain, of course. And, for my great grandfather, he just knew he had to feed 12 kids, so he had no choice but to just make it happen. And it's still running till this day. We had to pivot a lot of times. There was a lot of, setbacks we went through. But like any business, there's always going to be setbacks and challenges. And I think that is really important to talk about because nobody ever talks about that stuff. We always just see the success and we don't see the story behind it, what people had to sacrifice. And
Mhm.
my great grandfather was someone who was super focused, who was very business oriented, who would like make sure the boat would leave the pier like before he goes home. Even when he passed away, like I think there was a story that they said they saw his spirit still at the pier. So yeah, I mean now that my grand uncles have taken over it and have been instead of because back then they would be people using the boats to travel to different parts of the Philippines. But now we just focus on cargo. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. We just celebrated the 50th anniversary of him opening it up. So
And what was his name and her name?
so my great grandfather's name's Sulpicio, and my great grandmother's name's Anna.
So, okay, may they rest in peace.
Yeah.
That's celebrating the 50-year anniversary of that company that they set up. What was the name of the company?
Oh, I'm not gonna remember it. This one,
Okay, I've
once.
uh is it the Philippine Span
Yeah,
Asia
yeah,
Carrier Corporation?
yeah,
Philippine Span Asia Carrier Corporation.
yeah.
Span Asia. That's interesting. How forward thinking of them. So there were people moving before cargo moving.
Yeah, they were moving. Yeah, it was people before cargo, but now it's cheaper to fly a plane than to take a boat, and it's a lot more time time saving to go on a plane than on a boat. So yeah, so that's why in business, like sometimes you have to learn to pivot, and when something doesn't work, like you have to figure out what's the next step, right? And so they were able to do that, which has been great.
Yeah, that pivot, I think we all saw that during COVID, especially.
Yeah.
What did you do to pivot? Was there a moment in your life that you had to pivot?
I mean, yeah, for me, I realized podcasting was still a small platform, and that's when I decided to just branch out and start doing different things like books and other forms of media to really get better visibility, branding, get myself out there. So I mean, I still love podcasting, but it's still a very small platform if you compare it to other forms of media. So
Hmm. Who's your muse, Sheena?
my
Who
muse.
inspires you? Yeah.
I guess there's a lot. I mean, I share some of them in the book. Like I love Michelle Yeoh, Sandra Oh. I think they're just amazing Asian women who've been able to forge their own path, especially in Hollywood, where, the representation of Asians in Hollywood is still like not as much. It's slowly growing, but it's still, very, very small. So looking up to them has been great.
Yeah. And your favorite books?
Um, I'd probably be biased and say my book.
Yeah, because you spent so much time on it.
Yeah.
Yes, I have to say it's my favorite book at the moment as well.
Oh, thank you.
Um, of all these 800 interviews, right? Can you name some of your most memorable ones?
Oh, wow. I
Every
mean, there's a
single 800 is important, but just the most standout memorable ones that you can still remember until today.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember interviewing a lady who was a Christmas song artist, and that's really it's not an easy thing to do. I mean, Christmas only comes like what, 3 months out of the year when you think about it, or two if you're lucky. And there was nobody out there who would sign someone just to sing Christmas songs. So she had to set up her own record company, sign herself as a Christmas song artist, and has made a career out of it. And I think sometimes we have to, that it's just a great example of like being resourceful, right? If no one's going to do it, then you got to go out there and do it yourself, figure different ways to make it happen. There's also a lady that I interviewed who was born with no arms. So she's actually the first armless pilot, and does
Oh my
everything with her.
goodness, that's amazing.
Yeah. And sometimes we feel like our limitation stops us, and like
Yeah.
here's a woman who actually does have a limitation, but it never stopped her from living life to the fullest. I mean, she flies a plane with her feet,
Yeah.
which is amazing, right? So those are some of the stories that stood out.
Thanks for sharing. I wonder what's in store for you actually moving forward because you are definitely spruiking the book right now. And I really hope that it gets into the hands of more people than ever. Um, are you doing any book tours in Asia Pacific? Are you coming this way?
I haven't thought that far ahead yet. I know people keep asking me, and it's funny because sometimes, like, I might not have any plans, and I feel like I get anxiety when people ask me, and I feel like I need to plan and set. And so I've learned to like just say I don't know and be okay and
Okay,
learn to let.
why don't we do this, Sheena? I would like to invite you to Malaysia and to Sydney, Australia, and we will fix a date and I will host you and we will organize it. We'll
Okay.
make it happen rather than
Okay.
me asking you.
Okay,
How
thank you.
about that? We'll just make the tour happen. And you'll have a
But yeah,
holiday as well.
Yeah, we'll definitely figure that out. But yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate to be able to have some in-person events here in Toronto. I was able to speak in front of 400 students in Orlando, Florida. And in 2025, I'll be releasing a second book with Wiley, so I'm really excited about that. Because I didn't, I was already happy with one book. So to have a second book was just, wow, this is so awesome. So just really grateful for everything. And for me, I love utilizing social media as well. Like LinkedIn is one of my favorite social media platforms, and that has really helped me just build my brand and who I am and what I do and be able to connect with so many amazing people, kind of like yourself.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for even giving me a notice as well. I do appreciate it because as you say, as confident as we feel, sometimes I go out there and I just totally lose it because you're not always being the confident person every single moment. Some days, like you're something else or you're someone else to somebody else. For example, this morning I was just, the Uber for my nephew. I was running late for basketball. And um during those moments, you just morph into somebody else, right? And I think as women, we have so many of these, how would you say, like masks that we wear throughout the day that we switch. And I like this, this picture that you have behind you, the Tao of Self-Confidence with this woman in her, beautiful suit, and then she's a superwoman at the back.
Yeah.
Because that's what we need, I think, because for us to be able to morph, to be able to morph, you gotta kind of sort of lose who you were just a minute ago and step into the shoes and the clothes of this new woman that you're gonna be, and then
Yeah.
be that person for however long that is. Like now I'm putting on my self-confident woman podcaster suit with you. But actually deep down, I'm really, really very nervous. And I believe it or not, and a lot of friends of mine don't believe this. I'm actually really, really shy, but I
Uh-huh.
force myself to come out and have that, I don't know if you do it. I would like to hear if you do it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always anxious and nervous when I have to speak on stage or be interviewed, but I utilize that as an indication that I just want to do the best that I can. And so I just go out there, even if I fumble. I mean, I've blanked out on national Chinese TV. I've stuttered. I've done it all. And so for me, it's like if that was the worst that can happen, then I can conquer anything. And
That's the
so
spirit.
I'm not always as, sometimes I just also just like to stay home and just like watch Netflix, but I realize, it's not just about me, it's about every other Asian woman out there who feels invisible, who needs to see someone like who looks like, or, who looks like me, who's similar culture, realizing, if it's possible for her, it's possible for me, or vice versa. And representation is so important because I never had that. I never understood that I could be anything I wanted to be because I never saw anybody that looked like me who also forged that path.
I was just wondering, Sheena, in Canada, what is the media diversity like? Because recently in Australia, there's an organization called Media Diversity Australia, and it was founded by two amazing women, Antoinette Latouf, who's, I think she's of Lebanese background, and Isabel Lowe, who's actually now based in New York. These two ladies set it up because Australia's diversity on the media space was questionable. It was mostly, I think, 73% white Anglo-Saxon male. So, how is it in Canada?
Um, I mean, it's really hard to say because I don't really follow the Canadian media as much because
Just generally what you see on the news.
um I mean, there's women who've been fired for ageism, and if a Caucasian woman is fired for ageism, what more for non-white women, right? That was a big thing last year because, there's men who are way older than her who was never fired, and yet this
Mhm.
woman has been in the news for so long, and she's like a veteran, and then she got let go. And of course, they're not going to say that was the reason, but we all know that was the reason. So yeah, I mean, it's still, yeah, we do have diversity, but it's still not equal diversity, I guess. And especially coming from a country or a city like Toronto, where it's very, very multicultural, I think it's important that it shows all across the board.
What do you think lawmakers can do? Like now there's a bit of a huff and a puff because in the media, there seems to have a need to have a quota for inclusion. But a lot of the journalists who've been in their jobs for a long time are saying that it should be by meritocracy. Sorry, how do you say it? By merit,
Merit.
basically, by merit, and not just by your skin color. So it's kind of like a reverse.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Of course, we want diversity, but we also want the right kind, of course, right? And when we have these quotas aren't even doesn't even make sense because the quota is only like maybe 1 or 2%, and it doesn't really build diversity. And then, sometimes they pick someone who's not fit for the job, but just wants to fill a quota, and then, then companies will start saying, well, we did fill this quota and they weren't up for the job. So it's really hard to, like, of course, diversity is important, but like I guess like a catch 22. Of
Yeah,
course, we want to have talented people, and there are talented people out there from different races, different cultures. It's just sometimes, we're not seen because of our cultural background or the color of our skin, especially as an Asian woman. Like, there's this woman, her name is Kim Eng, and she's the first woman to be a major to be a manager in a major sports team, right? So she was a manager for the Miami Marlins, which is a huge baseball team here in the States. She got rejected by 10 other teams before she even became a general manager, but she has the track record that any person would want to hire her as a general manager. But because she's an Asian woman, like, people don't believe in her, right? If she was a white male, like, they would have hired her right away. In fact, she took the team to their first playoffs in 20 years, right?
that's
And so that's
amazing.
huge. Yeah, that's huge. And then after that, the franchise decided to hire a president of operations. So I guess someone above her. And to her, that was a slap in the face because, she did all this work, she brought the team to the playoffs, and then she has to like follow
Report.
yeah, report to a person that probably doesn't know really what they're doing, but she really does know what she's doing because every baseball fan that knows her track record. So yeah, I'm not saying that all people have no talents, but yeah, it's hard, of course, right? I think yes, diversity is important, but yes, also merit is important. And it's hard sometimes when we try, like, it's hard sometimes. I guess that's all I can say.
Well, let's go back to your book and your work. If there were three people you would be able to interview, who would they be?
Yeah, I mean, Michelle Yeoh, Sandra Oh,
Of
and
course. That's a good one.
and the third person, I don't know. Maybe I don't have a third person.
That's
Th
okay. Michelle and Sandra. So if you're
yeah.
listening in, Michelle Yeoh and Sandra Oh, obviously you're a Grey's Anatomy fan, I'm assuming.
And no, I've never watched an episode of Grey's Anatomy or not. I just liked all the movies that she was in, and she's such a great actress. And then,
She is
um,
actually. I really like her as well.
yeah, so I've always loved, the movies that she was in.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you even consider going into screen?
I'm not gonna say yes or no. We'll see where the wind takes us.
Well, thank you so much, Sheena, for your time in sharing and in divulging as well on um all of the things that you've learned in on this pathway. So you've had two books so far. Is it three or two?
I had three. I
Yeah.
haven't, yeah, I had three, and then I'll have a second book with Wiley that's going to be coming out in 2025.
Do you have a title or a hint?
Nothing
Not
yet.
yet. Okay, that's
Well, in the
exciting.
very beginning stages. So,
So, give us the links. What are the links? So we've got the website.
yeah, you can check out my website, sheenayapchan.com. I have a free quiz to unlock your self-confidence personality. You can also check out the Tao of Self-Confidence.com. That's my podcast website where you can check out past episodes. You can also pick up the Tao of Self-Confidence on Amazon. In Australia, I think they have it in I can never
Kunia.
remember. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at the bookstores or Amazon Australia.
I'm
And if
pretty
you
sure
forgot,
it'll be available in Malaysia and Kinokuniya as well.
oh yeah, it is as well in Malaysia. Yes, it is. You are correct.
And the
And
Philippines?
yes, it's available in the Philippines through Amazon and through the bookstore Fully Booked, at their flagship store. And if you don't remember anything I said, just Google my name, Sheena Yap Chan. I'm the only Sheena Yap Chan on the internet.
That's so awesome. By the way, Sheena, before we go, so the next pillar is you reading or even performing. So it's
Okay.
basically 10 minutes of you
Oh, okay.
reading or performing anything, and it could be about your book, could be from an excerpt. So I'll just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
mute myself and pass the mic over to you. Just introduce as if it's a new segment. Introduce yourself and introduce the text that you're going to read.
Okay.
Okay.
So my name is Sheena Yap Chan, and today I'll be reading the introduction of my book, The Tao of Self-Confidence, A Guide to Moving Beyond Trauma and Awakening Within. And the title of the introduction is called The State of Asian Women. So, growing up in Toronto, Canada in the 1990s, it was always difficult for me to see anyone in the media who looked like me. No one had similar facial features, and I found it hard to accept who I was and my own culture. I wished for blonde hair and blue eyes. I wanted to change my name from Sheena to Heather to sound more Western. Can you imagine being 9 years old and already facing all kinds of self-esteem issues because people who look like me weren't represented in what I saw and heard every day? Over the years, I've fully accept Over the years I've worked on fully accepting myself and my heritage. In the process, I promised myself that I would always try to create a stronger representation for Asian women in order to dismantle the negative stereotypes that we still face today. I started a podcast in 2015 called The Tao of Self-Confidence, where I've interviewed more than 700 Asian women on the topic of confidence. Although my podcast has reached over 1.2 million downloads and is among the top 0.5% most popular podcasts in the world, the visibility factor for Asian women was still non-existent almost everywhere else. In 2021, I co-created a book called Asian Women Who Boss Up, which highlights the stories of 18 Asian women who have been able to forge their own path, overcome obstacles, and thrive. It was amazing to see 16 Asian women on the front cover of the book, something I've never seen before. Asian women who boss up started giving us the visibility we deserve, and Asian women were seen in a different light. For years, Asian women have been bossing up in their own industries, but no publication has highlighted their collective breakthroughs and insight until now. I always believe that if you want the representation you crave, it must start with you. If you're not out there trying to create the representation you want to see, you're unknowingly continuing the vicious cycle. A report from Catalyst.org on the representation of women of color in management and leadership roles in the United States in 2021 was particularly disappointing, although not surprising. Black women 4.4%, Hispanic women 4.3%, and Asian women 2.7%. When I saw the stats, I started to wonder why Asian women had the lowest representation in leadership roles. Something in me wanted to dig deep and figure out why this was happening. When I was presented with the opportunity to write this book, I felt a little hesitant. I had bouts of imposter syndrome, doubting I was even the right person to write it. Who was I to write a book based on the topic of leadership? But I realized that if I gave in to my doubts and fears and didn't write this book, I would have been the biggest hypocrite in the world. So I went for it. I found a way to overcome my emotional blocks and made it happen. I feel grateful and honored to have this chance to write a book that not only helps Asian women, but all women in leadership. As women, we still face so many challenges in this arena. Many leadership books I see out there are basic how-to books or rigid manuals. Most of them don't talk about the reasons why women, particularly Asian women, don't advance in leadership. So I decided to create a book that really dove into the cultural and historical issues that affect a leadership career. That means exploring the things we have gone through, including what came before us, our heritage, the moment we were born into, and how that affected us in our daily life. We don't realize that our personal history and experiences can linger in us and subconsciously affect our actions and decisions in our daily lives. These subconscious, forgotten life experiences may be part of the reason why you are struggling in your current situation. This is why I decided to write a book like no other, a book I wish had been around when I was starting out, a book on leadership that touches on historical and cultural mindsets, as well as personal roadblocks or trauma you may be going through. If you don't work on your mindset first and figure out what kind of baggage you're carrying from the past, it's going to be an uphill battle to become the effective leader you were meant to be. This book will tackle the things you don't normally talk about, the taboos in your culture, and how you were brought up. I will bring up things that your Asian parents will tell you not to talk about. I will take you on a journey that you have never experienced before. This book will tackle topics such as the model minority myth and how that affected the Asian community for decades, the many issues that Asian women still face, intergenerational trauma, how to unlock other forms of trauma, the journey to healing from your traumas, self-love and why it matters, the power of self-confidence, and the future of Asian women leadership. And while this book may seem like it's catering to a specific audience, these specific stories complete a narrative tapestry that helps all of us better understand each other. You can learn from this because there will be parts of my story that you can relate to. I'm sure you have different taboos in your culture or negative stereotypes that make you feel less than a leader. I'm sure you had to navigate issues with racism or sexism in your life simply by being a woman. It's important to share your specific stories. I've been rejected way too many times in my life because my story was too specific or that it catered to a specific audience. But your specific story can help people from all walks of life in many ways. You can either relate to a story, learn something new, or see things from a different perspective. If you hear the same stories over and over, how would you learn and create positive changes? You can't keep doing the same things and expect a different result, which, by the way, is the very definition of insanity. Being specific is a good thing, and it's about time to learn about leadership from a different perspective, especially one that's often seen as invisible or not taken seriously in leadership roles. That perspective is for me, a woman of Asian descent. A woman of Asian descent. Stereotypes can come up just from how I look. The media has often implied people who look like me were the cause of COVID-19 or that my only goal is to be a good housewife. Because of my Asian features, I face immediate judgment, and this judgment from stereotypes has fueled a rise of violence against Asian women like me, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic. The community has been in tears for the Atlanta shooting in 2021 that took the lives of 6 innocent Asian women, the death of Christina Lee, who was murdered in her own apartment, and many others. Having a leadership book from an Asian woman's perspective is more important than ever. Being on the receiving end of generations of misdirected hate and rage, voices like mine need to come out of the background and be heard. In the words of Lizzo, it's about damn time.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Sheena, for sharing that. And I think that basically concludes today's podcast recording. That's actually from the first chapter of your book, isn't it?
It's the introduction. So
Yeah.
before yeah.
Yep. So we're here with Sheena Yap Chan. You can find out more about her from www.sheenayapchan.com. And she is the author and also podcaster of the Tao of Self-Confidence. If there's some confidence that you need today, go and check out her book because it's got very powerful words that have been weaved together from her experiences, her lived experiences, how she could overcome difficulties, how she pivoted in her life. And she's put all of that together with the voices of 800 women that she's interviewed. Thank you so much, Sheena, for being here with us today. And we hope that we can get your voice out to Malaysia and also Sydney, Australia. Thank
Thanks
you.
again for having me.
Would you have a tale to share or know somebody who does? Do you identify as a woman with heritage from the nations circling the contentious South China Sea? Wherever you are in the world, we'd love to hear from you. And creating an online presence for women of Southeast Asia or women of Southeast Asian heritage and honoring